Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today we're going to look at the studio discography of British prog rock, psychedelic rock, space rock, alt rock. Really can't classify these guys. Porcupine Tree. All right. One of the bands that probably, if I were to look and go back and look at all the requests we've got over the last month or two that you guys have asked, and going back even further, people have asked for top 10 song show, ranking the albums, anything and everything involving Porcupine Tree. Pete, when are you going to talk about Porcupine Tree? Don't you like Porcupine Tree, Pete? You never talk about Porcupine Tree. Why don't you talk about Porcupine Tree? Well, I'm going to talk about it. I've actually been listening to Porcupine Tree since the very early 90s and have followed them throughout their career. Got to see them live once at Nearfest. Enjoyed the hell out of them. And, they've kind of been quiet. Steven Wilson has been doing his solo thing. Put Porcupine Tree to rest, unfortunately, for a lot of us, right? But a lot of great music, a lot of great albums. In fact, some kick-ass albums that are almost impossible to rank. So, again, through most of these, leave it to Tala to always want to play with her toy. This is just so you know. That's what she's playing with. Always when I'm taping. Anyway, where was I? Porcupine Tree, basically the brainchild of Steven Wilson, okay, the master of the band, okay, the leader, the guy behind everything. Initially, this was kind of like a solo act for him, turned into an actual band. Okay, Steven, of course, singing, playing guitar, keyboards, all sorts of other various instruments. Richard Barbieri on keyboards, synthesizer and piano. Colin Edwin on bass. Okay, Gavin Harrison on drums. Also, Chris Maitland played drums for the band too for a number of years. Some really, really great albums, and I would say honestly, I had a real hard time with this because almost all these albums are equally as good, equally as enjoyable. It's almost impossible to pick one over the other. So I put them in an order that I'm going to go with today. I've been going back and forth over this for 2 days, listening and all I've been doing is listening to Porcupine Tree and just trying to figure it all out. And the one thing I can say with a certain amount of certainty is that there's one album that I clearly like the least. And that's their very, very first album, On the Sunday of Life. Again, it's not a terrible album. And I'm sure there's going to be people out there that are going to be like, oh man, that's my favorite, the first. I've never really enjoyed this all that much. It's very psychedelic and British poppy. And, there's a certain charm to it, I guess. I just don't think that Steven really got to where he was going to go with this band till the next release and follow-up releases. And again, I've had this since really early on. In fact, I almost gave up on Porcupine Tree totally after this. And I was like, all right, so many people were talking about, the next one. They're like, okay, I'll give it a try. And I'm like, whoa, totally different. So yeah, I've never really warmed up to this. And I've had it for ages. I've listened to it many times. Easily my least favorite Porcupine Tree album, but if you love it, that's totally cool, because that's the great thing about doing a show like this is we can all talk about which albums we like and why and how we rank them, because we all hear things differently, right? My list is going to be completely different than yours and yours and yours, and that's the way it should be, all right? So that's coming in at the bottom for me. All right, next up, I'm going to go with Up the Downstairs. So here, everything going forward, I like a lot, okay? I will say, though, out of most of the rest of the albums that I'm going to talk about next, probably, again, least favorite out of all of them, but this is a very good album, okay? A very good album. A lot of early cool tracks like Burning Sky, Synethsia, I can never say it. Synethsia? It's like amnesia, Synethsia? However the hell you say it. Great tune. Always Never, Up the Downstairs. A lot of really cool tunes. Kind of space rocky, kind of psychedelic, right? There's a little kind of pop leaning still there as well. But again, the band starting to kind of figure out, Steven Wilson specifically, figuring out kind of what direction he wants to go in. All right, next up, I'm going to go with Lightbulb Sun. Some of the other albums from this time period. These are one of their mid-period albums. I like some of the other ones a little bit better, but this is a very strong album. This one's a little bit on the mellow side. So they went through a few years where kind of trying to move away from the space rock and the psychedelic and do more of kind of like an alt rock type of thing with pop elements, a lot of dreamy soundscapes and things like that, very catchy stuff. Trying to catch on with a more mainstream audience. I think this is probably one of the more successful ones that's going that route, but it's kind of a little less heavier than some of the ones that came around it and before it and after it. I think it's a little less proggy than some of the early stuff. I do like this album. It's got some great, the title track is really good. The Rest Will Flow, Hate Song is a cool tune. Russia on Ice. Some really enjoyable, kind of dreamy, poppy, I guess you can call them psychedelic tunes on here. But not as successful as some of the other ones, in my opinion. But a very strong album. One of the more mellow ones, but still very, very good. Some great songs. Next, and God, if you would have asked me this 20 years ago, I would have ranked this higher. But I think, Signify was one of my early favorite albums by them, but it's since gotten surpassed, I should say, by a bunch of others. Although it's a fantastic album. I was listening to it again this morning. I hadn't heard it in a while. I was like, yeah, some really good stuff on here. Sleep of No Dreamin', Signify, Sever, what a great song that is. Waiting, Phase 1 and Phase 2, Intermediate Jesus, some really cool songs on here. Here's, I think, with this album, where this band really became a band and really had a focus on what they wanted to do. A lot of fun. The album that really sold me on Porcupine Tree as a band. Okay. All right, next up, we're going to go with A Stupid Dream. I think if I remember correctly, I don't have the kind of the sales numbers and what have you, but I believe at the time, this was Porcupine Tree's biggest selling album. Still might be. Overall units, I think one of the later albums actually did better chart-wise, but I think this one actually sold more. Even Less, Stupid Dream, Pure Narcotic. Fantastic stuff. This Is No Rehearsal. A lot of great songs on here. And a more rockin' album from them. So they had a couple albums in a row where they were amping up the guitar thunder a little bit. Okay. A fun album. I was big into this when it came out. Still dig it. This one, while I was putting together this ranking, this album kind of went up and down on my list. I'm talking about Deadwing. And because there's like a couple tracks on here that are just like absolutely killer. And this is one of Porcupine Tree's heavier albums. So you've got, Deadwing, the title track. Shallow is a killer song. It's got a catchy chorus, heavy riffs. Then you've got the absolutely gorgeous and dreamy Lazarus. Okay. One of like the best unknown pop songs ever written, right? A great song. Halo is another really cool pop tune. And then you got the kind of cool proggy, kind of like, psychedelic stuff, space rock stuff on here. Open Car, Melachon Scratch, all sorts of good stuff on here. A raucous, up-tempo, quite rockin' album, Deadwing from Porcupine Tree. All right, next I'm going to go with their final album so far. Could rank a little higher. You know what I think it is? Sometimes you have more time spent with certain recordings because this is their most recent one, even though it came out what seems like a million years ago. There's some others that are going to rank a little higher, but this is excellent stuff. The Incident. Okay, 2-disc set. You got the first disc is like the long, I don't even remember how many minutes long the Incident multi-part track is. Fantastic stuff. And then you got a handful of other tunes on disc 2, including Remember Me Lover, which finishes it off at nearly 8 minutes long, but quite good. If this is going to be the album that they go out on, Gotta love that, right? Gotta love when a band kind of goes out on its own accord and releases a killer LP, killer CD, killer record, whatever you want to call it, and just wows fans, wows the critics, and then that's it. Thanks for being on our show. I'm going to quote my buddy Wild Bill on that. So this is going to come in number 4 for me. You know, some of these could change. I mean, like I said, this was hard. So many of these albums, in my opinion, are just like equally as strong as the next. And it's like, you know. But I'm going to go with next up, Fear of a Blank Planet as number 3. You know, this is top shelf stuff here. A lot of really cool tunes, lengthy tunes. This is kind of like more of their epic prog statement. It's still heavy as well. Kind of darker album. That's why I like it, though. You know me. I tend to like kind of like that darker, more serious stuff. A lot of great songs on here. I would say everything is very solid on this album, and just kind of start to finish, just really some epic sounds. And I think this is probably Porcupine Tree at their most mature sounding. And I remember when this came out specifically, a lot of people were into this. And I've talked to a lot of Porcupine Tree fans over the years who list this as their favorite. And you know what? I listened to this the other night. I was like, damn, it's a fucking good album, right? So, again, this could slot in higher at any given time, right? But today it's going to come in number 3. Number 2, I'm going to go with my beloved The Sky Moves Sideways. And I know you're saying, but Pete, I thought you said that the early stuff you weren't as into as some of the later stuff yet, with the exception of this album. This, for me, is just fantastic. And the reason why, and this album sounds really nothing like any of their other studio albums, because this, to me, is kind of like Porcupine Tree going complete space rock, doing their Pink Floyd meets Eloy type of thing, you know, with a little Tangerine Dream thrown in there. You know, just incredible stuff. Wild, spacey synths, soaring lead electric guitar solos, extended instrumental passages, just, you know, you got the epic title track, all right, Phase 1. You got Dislocated Day, for crying out loud. Great song. Moon Loop, another epic. The Sky Moves Sideways, Phase 2. It's just one epic track after another. This is just like a musical exploration. This is like one of those albums that you put on your stereo or whatever, wherever you're listening on, turn off the lights, close your eyes, and just like let it take you away. Fantastic stuff. On today's ranking, only going to be best by my favorite album by them, In Absentia. You know, again, as you know, when I do these, I usually try to revisit all the albums as best as I can, especially if I haven't listened to them in a while. And the more I kind of went through this one, the more I'm like, yeah, that's going to be the one. It's going to be the one. Just got trains, the sound of music, Wedding Nails, Prodigal, Strip the Soul. I mean, just, and again, another one of their heavier albums. I always liked Porcupine Tree doing the kind of crunchier stuff, because that's me, right? But still plenty of the kind of dreamy, spacey, proggy stuff on here. The great pop melodies, some of those kind of like alt rock kind of choruses and things like that. So I'm going to go with In Absentia for today as my number 1 pick through the Porcupine Tree studio catalog. So I'm sure some of you are like, oh, but he didn't talk about live albums. He didn't talk about all those great kind of collections of B-sides and all that kind of stuff. Well, no, this is just the studio albums. I will, however, mention some pretty cool kind of collections because, you know, in most cases, these contain, you know, additional session tracks or leftover tracks or B-sides or, you know, instrumental versions of stuff and what have you. And in most cases, they're kind of like, you know, new albums on their own or their EPs mostly. So we've got Metanoia, all right, kind of improvised instrumental stuff from 1995 and 96. All right, Metanoia is a lot of fun. All right, what else we got here? That we have here, hold on, Nil Recurring. All right. More kind of leftover stuff. We got Staircase Infinities. Nice little EP, probably about 20, 25 minutes long. That's cool, worth having. Recordings. This is quite good. Again, all this is kind of like just leftover shit that they had, and alt versions of things and instrumental mixes. Voyage 34, The Complete Trip. Okay, if you're into the more psychedelic stuff, this is pretty neat. All right, it's basically like 4 long tracks, a lot of jamming and experimenting going on there. So some cool stuff. If you want, if you know you've maybe got most of the Porcupine Tree studio catalog and want to kind of dip into the rest, if you can find any of that stuff. I don't. This stuff may be long out of print. I don't know. So let me go over my list one more time. It's coming in at number 1 in absentia. Okay. Coming in at number 2, The Sky Moves Sideways. Number 3, Fear of a Blank Planet. Number 4, The Incident. Number 5, Deadwing. Number 6, Stupid Dream. Number 7, Signify. Number 8, Lightbulb Sun. Number 9, Up the Downstairs. And number 10, On the Sunday of Life. Is that only 10? Wow. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, only 10 studio albums. 10 studio albums. What was their first album? Came out with 89, 90, something like that. So, but some great stuff there. A band that I never understand why they weren't absolutely enormous, because they were really starting to pump out some really, really cool albums, very accessible albums, like at the height of, alternative rock, and the new metal came in, and I quite frankly thought their music could have fit right in there and was better than most of those other bands. But maybe they were a little too British here for the States. I don't know. That's possible, but. Maybe they were too proggy for that's probably what they were. They were too proggy for the alternative rock crowd, and they were too alternative sounding for the prog crowd. But yeah, I know a ton of prog fans who love these guys. In fact, I can't think of too many people who are into, this kind of music who do not like Porcupine Tree. And most of those people now follow Steven Wilson doing whatever it is he does. So, a great catalog. Have we seen the last of Porcupine Tree? No one knows. No one knows what Mr. Wilson, although quite frankly, a lot of his solo stuff is not that far removed from some of the great Porcupine Tree content, and songs and what have you. So we'll see. Anyway, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. So we'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow with some more stuff. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be yet. I have a bunch of ranking the albums on the to-do list. I may take tomorrow off. We'll see. Or I may just kind of pump something out for you, because I know I got tons that I've been looking at. You know what it is? I've got like a whole bunch that I'm working on. It's just a matter of which one I want to deliver tomorrow. So we'll see. Got plenty of stuff to do. Plenty of stuff to do. Some of the bands that are upcoming. I know we've had a bunch of people asking for Dream Theater lately. I'm actually going to get my brother on the show. My brother has agreed to do ranking the Dream Theater studio albums with me. He has never appeared on this show before. He and I are huge Dream Theater fans. I always go to see Dream Theater live with him. So he's never done this kind of thing before. So he's a little nervous about it. But he will be joining me live via Zoom sometime over the next couple weeks, and we'll do that. I'm trying to get him to do the Symphony X discography as well with me, because he's also a big Symphony X fan. So we'll see. What else I got? So we've had some folks asking for Blackfoot and the Outlaws and all sorts of stuff. I've got Camel. People have been asking for Camel left and right. Vandergraaf Generator. I mean, my problem with Camel and Vandergraaf Generator, I think I'm missing like 1, maybe 2 albums from each of their discographies. I may decide to do these anyway, just and omit it, because I'm not sure I'm going to get those, what I'm missing, anytime soon. There's a lot of bands like that. You guys have been asking for like left and right, but I'm missing a couple albums. And I'm not just going to go buying all this stuff just to have it to show. So what I may do is I may actually go and make sure I've listened to the albums that I'm missing, and then I'll just include them in with all the stuff that I have. And we'll just do that, because then I can crank out Vandergraaf or Camel or any number of other things fairly quickly. So And I haven't forgot about our guest hosts that we talked about. I've been really busy. Chris Allen's been really busy. Butch Jones has been really busy. Mike Antonelli too. So we're going to get back into rescheduling with everybody. At this point, the spring is hopefully not too far away, so we may just wait until then to kind of get everybody in here. So, or me go there, whatever. So it's all coming, guys. So stay tuned, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.